Hey everyone, excuse me. It's 11 o'clock. The inquiry is resumed. Miss Nevin, would you like to start your cross-examination, please?
Please. Good morning, Mrs. Nevill. What would be most helpful to you? Would it be if I tell you the documents I'd like to go to now so you can get them up in advance? Or are you happy for me to do that as we go along? I only have three, so.
Okay, I think as you go along.
Okay.
If that's okay.
No
Thank you.
problem. So just first of all, just a few questions touching on your experience. You mentioned at paragraph 1.3 of your proof of evidence that in your former role as chief executive of the BFI, that entailed being a voice for industry, domestic and inward bound.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And you also mentioned that in the same paragraph that this required having a medium and long-term rigorous understanding of the international industry.
Yes.
And in Chief with My Learned Friend, you discussed and you elaborated on that, and you said that this involved surveying what was going on in the world and where that competition was coming from.
Yes.
And you mentioned that this also involved having discussions with international industry and who were telling you about what they needed in the UK and what the UK needed to retain that competitive edge.
Yes.
Correct? And so just when you mention inward bound, just to clarify, you mentioned this earlier, but that involved a large part of that was that US inward investment market, that English language speaking market, correct?
You mean when I was at the BFI?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I think ironically less so because the BFC tended to do most of that. Whereas my job was really to work on new potential markets. So I did a lot in China and Korea and places like that.
Understood. A large part of the inward investment market, going beyond your specific role, is that crucial US English language speaking market.
It is.
And so, forgive me for stating the obvious, but I assume that your role, and do tell me otherwise if not, but I assume that involved clearly and deliberately identifying potential target markets for the UK.
Yes, it did.
And that would have involved going through things like, identifying the total production spend of the target market.
Yes.
And how much studio space would be required to accommodate that in the UK?
No.
That was more the BFC's role, I think.
Yes. I mean, that the granularity would have been the next step. So it would be surveying the world. Where do we think that there are opportunities building? What would we need to do to get them to come and think of shooting in the UK instead of on their own?
And assessing how much studio space would be required for that is obviously an important part of that exercise.
Yes.
And we know, don't we, that Marlow Film Studios' target market is that high-end HETV and film market. It's that US investment, English language market. That's the target market really for this studio.
It is the target market for it, but I would also like to signal that what I am seeing at the moment as a trend, which is quite interesting, is that we are finding increasingly producers and directors from other countries like South Korea, for example, choosing to come and shoot English language productions here in the UK. So the director of Parasite that won the Oscar, he's shooting here at the moment. We've got Del Toro, Mexican, he's choosing to shoot here. Yorgos Lanthimos is Greek. He has pretty much moved to the UK to shoot. So I think it's just so that we understand the sort of honeypot that the UK has.
Understood. But is the English language part, given there are more international factors involved, as you pointed out, of course. And the particular segment then of this international market that the UK is best placed to attract is looking for that grade A space, as you've mentioned. That's the segment that could feasibly then come to Marlow, trickling down, going through the UK to Marlow. And so then, given your experience and the nature of the appellant's case at this inquiry, I expect you would agree that the inspector does need to have a grasp on the specific market that Marlow Film Studios is hoping to attract.
Yes.
So the inspector will be interested in things like what that looks like in production value, potentially.
Yes.
The inspector will also be interested in, kind of going back to the exercises we discussed before on what you and your colleagues would have been thinking about. The inspector will also be interested in how much studio space is required to accommodate that.
Yes.
But you've not presented this inquiry, have you, with any evidence on the specific amount of production spend from the English language segment of the US market that the UK is currently missing out on? Yes, it's a long
thank
one.
you. Thank you.
I'll slow it down. You've not presented the inquiry with any evidence, have you, on the specific amount of production spend from the English language segment of the US market that the UK is currently missing out on?
I haven't done, but I think my colleague from Nordicity will be doing so next week. So I do know what it is, but I didn't have it in my evidence. You're correct.
But we don't have that level of segmentation, do we, before this inquiry? We don't have specific figures of what the UK is currently missing out on.
Oh, I think we do. I think we do. I think in Nordicity's report, I think we do.
Could you point me to that if you have it to your hand?
Oh, because I'm not giving evidence on his report, but this is this is a discussion that we've had.
Take that up with someone else.
Yes, we have.
That's fair.
And so we do know how much English language, well, there is an estimate in there, obviously it's an estimate, of how much English language production coming out of the US is not coming here. In other words, what is the size of that market potential that the UK has? And it's between 50 and 70 billion. But you'll need to check that with Mr. Jodorowsky next week.
Okay. But we don't have any exact figures on how much of that market would then trickle down to the West London cluster, and we don't have any exact figures on how much could then potentially trickle down to Marlow.
I don't think that's possible to know. I think all we can say is that's the size of the opportunity that has been identified.
Yes, that's exactly the point, really. It's just that it's not possible to know that in exact terms. And if we don't know that in exact terms, and if it's not possible to know that in exact terms, as you've said, it's not possible to calculate the precise amount of studio space that's required to accommodate it, given those uncertainties that you've just referred to.
I don't believe that this can be an exact science. I know this isn't the answer that you're looking for. I don't think it's an exact science. Is it possible to know exactly how many?
Can we know, and please do qualify them, but
yes,
can we know exactly how much space is required? It's a yes or no, and absolutely qualify. I won't cut you off.
Okay, so just to be clear, the question I'm answering, you're asking, is it possible for the UK to exactly know the size of studio space that we might need from the potential market opportunity of the answer is no. Can I qualify?
Yes.
Thank you. I mean, I think it would be impossible to know. I don't even think producers themselves in the US would know. But I think what we do know is that there is, Nordicity will present the figures that there's billions of pounds worth of spend that isn't coming here, that we have a market share around about 8%. And I would qualify saying that given that we're already the destination of choice for most of those productions, the opportunity for increase beyond the growth trajectory is definitely there, and we can't ignore it. Yeah, sorry, I spoke too fast again.
No, you didn't speak too fast. You're saying given we're a destination of choice, but we only have 8%, can you explain that differential?
It's a very good question, actually. Yeah, no, it is. Let me just think about that a bit. Well, I think probably number one is that we haven't got the space to take more. But going to the bottom of your question is, if we had all the space in the world here in the UK, would the producers choose to land all of that £1 billion spent here? No, because a huge part of it's going to stay domestically in America. There are other competing territories, but I think the size of it is a demonstration of what we could gain, given that we have consistently gained production spend over recent times. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
No, not at all. Please do. Please do. You mentioned in Chief as well that people are looking out for an environment that is nice to be in. I think those were your exact words, weren't they? And you then went on to elaborate and saying, if you were discussing a producer that was looking to, attract top talent, if you asked them where they'd like to go, they'd say of the style and quality of Marlowe. Correct?
Yes.
But that's not an argument about additionality, is it, Mrs. Nevill?
Could you talk a bit more?
Yes. I mean, that's an argument about potentially displacing people from other studios that might be less nice to be in, isn't it?
I think it depends where your level of ambition is. As I think we are,
we're yes or a no, and then by all
Okay.
means qualify. But I'll repeat the question.
Yes,
It's not.
Thank you.
Yes, so that's really an argument about displacing people from studios that might be less nice to be in.
That's a potential, yes.
So it's not an argument of an uncatered for need for that. It's that there are studios that might be less nice to be in, but you're not going to get additionality from that.
That is true. It is an argument for fighting the competition.
So if we turn just to the question of investment then, you state again back to paragraph 1.3 of your proof that you have experience of enticing multi-billions of pounds of inward investment to the UK.
Hang on, sorry, let me find.
Paragraph 1.3 of your proof.
I'm just going to go to it. I've lost my front page now. Thought we were done with that.
Okay.
Hang on. Sorry, bear with me. I'll find it.
Okay. Would it help if I gave you the CD number?
No, I'm having an IT issue here. It seems to have got stuck on something and I can't find a way to go back.
Happens to all of us.
Okay. I'll start again. Don't worry.
The proof.
It's the proof, yes.
Yes.
It's Mrs. Neville's
I know,
proof.
but I can't find page 1. I got rid of it, assuming that I wouldn't need it anymore. Hang on. Don't wait, let me get it on here. Get it on here. Documents here. You'll need to go up. They're here. They're here. View the documents. Core documents inquiry. Sorry about this. Sorry. Very kind. Yeah. I've got. I don't know why I don't know how I've just lost that particular page. Right. Sorry. Apologies. Which paragraph?
1.3.
1.3. Yes.
And in this paragraph, you talk about your experience of enticing multi-billions of pounds of inwards investment to the UK, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So you know how investors tick, so to speak, then you know what they're interested in. You've had experience of dealing with that.
Yes, I have.
And if I could ask you, please, just to look at Mr. Davis's proof, and the CD reference for that, it's CD 8006 AB.
CD 8006. Yeah. Which bit?
Paragraph 9.22. And the part I'm looking for is just the quote about investment. And I think it's talks about there is still a large amount of unsatisfied global capital prepared to invest in studio developments in the UK. Correct?
Yes, I've got it.
And I mean, you know from your experience that the bottom line for investors is, will they get a return on investment, isn't it?
Yes.
And is there an additional amount of business that can come in that's not currently being catered for, correct?
Yes.
And a gap in the market then that they can fill.
Yes.
And so unless they're almost quite absolutely certain that there will be additionality from this development, an investor's not going to take that risk without that certainty,
Yeah.
correct? So turning then to streaming.
Sorry, I think
Yes.
I missed your question on that.
Which question?
Your last question on 9.22.
It was about the
Sorry.
very last question I asked.
Yes.
I think you answered yes, but I'm happy to repeat it.
Could you?
Yes, no
Sorry,
problem.
I was just agreeing with where you got to. I hadn't realised it was a question. Sorry. Sorry.
It's about the question of additionality.
Yes.
And unless an investor is certain that there is that additionality, that market that they can tap into, they're not going to take the risk without that certainty.
Yes, I agree with that.
Thank you. So just moving on to paragraph 2.2 of your proof.
My proof.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Got that one.
So this is where you start to go on to discuss the proliferation of streaming platforms.
Yes. Got
And
it.
thank you. And you talk about the link with that to exponential and continuing market growth, I think the words you use. Correct?
Yes.
But there is no direct link, is there, Ms. Nevill, between subscription numbers and demand for studio space, is there? That specific link there between subscriber numbers and studio space.
Is there a direct link between
A direct link between the
No.
two? Because you can't quantify it in terms of studio space. You can't quantify it in terms of production spend necessarily, can you?
No, there isn't a direct. Well, put it this way: I am not aware of a direct correlation between subscriber numbers and production spend.
And just to look at what the market on that currently looks like for streamers and subscription business, if we go back then to Mr. Davis's proof, paragraph 2.11.
$2.11.
Yes.
Right.
It's just the last line of that paragraph. Mr. Davis here is talking about the evolution of the streamer business and mentions over time other providers such as Lionsgate, Peacock Universal and Hulu Disney are likely to consolidate with other platforms, or in the case of Universal, acquire one of the key providers who have already established a customer base locally, globally. It's paragraph 2.11, and it's the last line of that paragraph. This is where Mr. Davis is discussing where the streamer business is going. And so, I mean, the first point from this, what we can see from this evidence is that we're no longer in a period of exponential streamer growth, are we, where new platforms are constantly coming online.
To object to this. It's not for this witness. This is for Mr. Davis. It's not appropriate to ask this.
I disagree, because
Well,
Mrs. Nevill, paragraph 2.2 of her proof talks about the proliferation of streaming platforms. This is squarely within the remit of her evidence. I strongly disagree.
No, this is for Mr. Davis. Ask him next week about this. Sorry, Mum, it's quite clear the division.
I understand the division and there are a number of witnesses. She does talk about the exponential growth has been driven by market forces. She does talk about that.
Yes, that wasn't the question she was being asked about.
What was your question? Because I was taking notes at the same time.
I was first going to look at what the evidence says
Yeah.
on this exponential streamer growth. And the point was that we're no longer in, just one moment, I've regathered my thoughts at my question.
In a place of exponential growth because of what Mr. Davis says.
Yes,
That's for Mr. Davis. I'm sorry, that is for Mr. Davis.
my question is, I'll try again.
What's your question?
We're no longer in a period of exponential streamer growth with new platforms constantly coming online, are we?
I think that's a fair question to ask given what Mr. Davis says. And
No, I completely disagree. It's for Mr. Davis. It's not for her. It's why is Miss Nevill think this question's? Why can you not ask this question of the witness who addresses this?
well, she probably will. But
Well, exactly. Thank you, Mum. That's my point.
I
we're
don't
going
think
to
it's
ask Mr. Davis the
appropriate.
question about it because he clearly says that they're going to consolidate. But I would like Miss Neville's. You are Miss Neville, aren't you?
I can be anything you like.
Miss-
Yes. I am Mrs. Neville. Day
I
8.
do panic when
I'm
I do.
still here. Yeah, don't
I'd like your
panic.
thoughts on that
I've
question,
been called
please.
worse. Don't
Given what you said about the exponential growth, do you think it might slow down because
Okay.
of what Mr. Davis said, or do you disagree?
So there's quite a lot to unpack here, isn't there? So first of all, as we both agree, there's no exact scientific correlation between content spend, exact studio space, and subscriber numbers. We do know that. Subscriber growth, actually, it's holding its own. Netflix's recent, what do you call it, reports literally in the last few days have been much stronger than the market expected. Much market expected. So I think, and there are quite a lot of other platforms coming on, dealing with different sorts of quality and quantity. But I suppose at some point in the future there will be saturation.
And we are already in this period of consolidation, aren't we? Given the paragraph we
Say that again.
we're in a period of consolidation amongst the streamer platforms, and that's what the paragraph from Mr. Davis's evidence shows us.
I'm not sure that paragraph in his evidence says that. And when you talk about consolidation, I think you talk about that the streamers are starting to look at a different business model, which is
Absolutely.
different to consolidation.
But what we're seeing at the moment are, efforts to double down on that market share and minimise the competition.
I think I'm not sure I agree with you there. Forgive me. So I think that I think they're still very much looking over their shoulder at the competition.
Yes. But if platforms are consolidating with other platforms, that is an attempt to respond to that changing business model and ensure that there is less competition. Because obviously, if you bring in what was previously a competitor to your business, it means they're no longer a competitor, they're part of your business.
My common sense would tell me that, but I think it's something you need to ask Mr. Davis about on Tuesday.
But the key question is, none of this directly translates into greater demand for studio space, does it?
Sorry, I couldn't catch that.
Do you want me to move the mic closer?
It just comes across a bit muffled, that's all.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think the key question is that none of this directly translates into a greater demand for studio space, does it?
She's already answered that question and said,
Okay.
no,
Thank
there's no
you.
direct correlation. So
So then to go to paragraph 3.3 of your proof, please.
That's it. Thank you.
And this is where you talk about, I'm particularly interested in the last line of your proof here, where you talk about the growth of the streaming market opening up to audiences for South Korean films and HGTV productions. You mentioned some favourites of mine there, Handmaiden, Paradise,
Yes.
Parasite, Squid Games. So you accept that this non-English speaking market is growing?
The non-English speaking market is growing, but so is the English speaking market growing, because the world is getting much easier watching subtitle films. So
But the increasing focus is going to that direction. And again, I just pull up the Knight Frank report, and it's paragraph 2.2.8.
Do you know where that is?
I've got it on a different drive, this
Okay.
one.
Because it's at the end of Mr.
Oh, is that? Thank
Davis's proof.
Right, I've got it on, oh, have I? Oh, it's the end of Mr. Davis's proof.
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
okay. Hold fire. Do you want to charge on? Because I have read the Knight Franks, so perhaps I can.
Well, I'll just let you get the paragraph
Okay,
up first.
which
to be fair to
paragraph?
you. It's paragraph 2.2.8. We're in the Knight Frank report.
Can't see a 2.2.8.
It's page 60, page 62 on the PDF.
Oh, page 62.
But it's on the PDF, so it won't. It's page 15
Okay.
on the actual document paginated.
2.8.
Straight from 2.1 to 3, yeah.
It's on page 15 of the Knight Frank report,
Oh,
if that
sorry.
helps.
Did I say 16?
15.
That's the PDF page, ma'am, I think. So
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, it goes
Right.
on to page 16. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I've got it. Okay. No, 42. Okay, we're here. 15. Thank you, Matthew. Okay,
Okay.
I'm here.
thank you.
Thank you.
So this paragraph here, it discusses, many streaming services are increasingly focused on international market growth. So I hear what you say about the English market not going away, of course, but you do accept from this that there is that increasing focus on that international market.
Yes, there's definitely a diversification of content.
And the paragraph goes on to discuss that 51% of Netflix's film and TV budget is expected to be directed towards internationally sourced content.
So which paragraph's that?
Same paragraph.
Okay. Sorry, I've lost it now. Which paragraph
It's
is it?
still paragraph 2.2.8.
Okay, thank you. Right.
It's just the next line on from.
Okay, yes, I've got it, yes.
And so it says here that the analysis from Ampere is that 51% of Netflix's film and TV budget is expected to be directed towards internationally sourced content. And
Yes.
so that internationally sourced content will inevitably use studio space, won't it? That's based outside the UK and English-speaking countries.
No, I don't believe that. And I think there's evidence, which I was saying earlier. In fact, one of the examples I had was the exact opposite, where a foreign content is being made here.
I think the exact example you gave was a South Korean producer, I think it was, but the filming was in
yeah.
English, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes, but what I'm talking about is your Handmaidens and your Parasites and your Squid Games, where the language is not
Yeah.
in English. Yes.
Possibly.
Yeah, and they will want to film in countries where that language is spoken,
Yes.
and they want to film on location,
I
presumably.
mean, common sense would suggest that they would probably choose to film in their own domestic language. Yes.
Yeah. And we've agreed that that's the increasing focus of that international market growth.
It's a growth area.
Just so that for my note though, that only is in relation to, is it many streaming services or is that just in relation to Netflix?
It's a question for the witness.
Well, it was which, yeah,
Yeah.
the report talks about many streaming services are increasingly focused on international market growth, and then it talks about Netflix specifically. Do you
I
think
think you'd have to ask Mr.
Yeah,
David
okay,
if
understood.
that's okay.
Yeah.
I might give the wrong evidence.
So we're on Netflix. Your proof talks about Netflix at paragraph 2.2.
Yes.
And you talk here about Netflix beating Wall Street revenue. And the figure you give is 9.6 billion revenue in the quote you give there.
In 2.2.
In 2.2 in the quotation.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah.
And then in your next paragraph, you go on to discuss the strong financial growth of Netflix continuing.
Yes.
And you give the revenue figures there and the growth. So Netflix seems to be booming, doesn't it, based on what you've given in your evidence?
Growing. Yes.
Yes. If we just go to the parliamentary inquiry documents, please. You might recall you looked at some of these with my learned friend, Mr. Bird, earlier. And the one I'd like you to go to is CD 13032, please.
CD 13.
032.
So you're in Save Marlow Greenbelt evidence
Thank you.
folder.
CD 13
032.
032. Okay, thank you.
I'll let you get that up, and then when you're there,
What's it? Yes.
you're there. It's PDF page 20.
Can you tell me what the question is? Because I haven't got it in PDF.
It is question, scrolling up a little bit, Q377.
Thank you. $377.
Yes, it's PDF page 20, because there's quite a little bit in Q377 before we get to the part I'm interested in. I'd like you to go, please, to the first paragraph from Mr. Benjamin King.
Yes.
And
Thank
so
you.
just for the inspector's purpose, Benjamin King is the Senior Director of Public Policy, UK and Ireland for Netflix,
Yes.
correct?
So this is 376. Q6.
We're in Q377, it starts.
All right.
And then if you scroll down in that question, we come to
Oh,
Benjamin.
okay. Yes. Okay.
We
Thank
come
you.
to Benjamin King.
Yes. Thank you.
And Benjamin King, as we said, is from Netflix. And he discusses the question of studio space. And as we've agreed, Netflix is doing quite well. Mr. King says nothing in this paragraph, does he, about a difficulty to get studio space?
No.
And if we move on then finally to the question of MLAs, these multi-annual.
But he does say, someone just wondered if it's the same. He does say earlier in the evidence, in the same context, I'm not actually, in question 347, he does talk about, as the contextualizing, that it's really important that the country keeps its eye on what business we want in 10 years' time. In other words, the inference is we can't be complacent.
But that's not a statement, is it, about a lack of space?
I think the context was that we need to keep an eye on it, but it wasn't. You're right. It wasn't a statement about lack of space in the context of 377.
That's question 347 answer. Did you say?
Sorry.
The answer to question 347, did you say Benjamin King?
Well, I was asked a question about 377.
Yeah, and then you've taken.
And I've said, yes, he doesn't mention here a shortage of space, but he has qualified that in 348, which was earlier. And he says, my message to policymakers today would be to think hard about the industry that we want to have in 10 years' time, not just the one that we have today.
Yes, but that's not at all a statement about a lack of space. Mr. King's not saying he's struggling to find space.
No, he wasn't saying that at that moment. I agree.
And then just to move on then to the question of MLAs. I think it's Paramount, Sony and Apple are currently the production companies not tied into MLAs.
Yes.
And if we just go back to page 20, internal page 20, if you're working off PDF numbers.
Is this in the evidence? The
In
parliamentary
the same
evidence?
document,
Yes.
So I'm going back to where we were with Benjamin King. So it's internal page PDF 20.
Okay. Can you tell me what the question number is? Sorry.
It's question 377 again.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And it's right under what we just looked at with Benjamin
Yes.
King.
Yes.
And it's Mitchell Simon's contribution that I'm interested in. Are you there?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm here. Sorry. Yes.
No problem.
Yes. Sorry.
And Mitchell Simon's, just to help the inspector again, is from Paramount, isn't he?
I don't know him, but yes, if you say so.
Well, let's just go to the very first page of the document where it sets out the witnesses and
Okay.
yes, just
Okay.
to confirm, it's
Thank you.
Mitchell Simon's, Vice President, Public Policy and Government Affairs, EMEA, Paramount. And we've just agreed Paramount is not one of those producers that's tied into an MLA.
That's right.
Correct. And what Mitchell Simon says to the inquiry, if we go to the very last paragraph of his evidence.
Sorry, can you give me that reference again? Because I went back up to the top and now I've forgotten what question you were talking about.
377.
Thank you.
It's internal page 20 and it's the very last paragraph of that question.
Got it. Thank you.
So what Mitchell Simon says here, he says, from our perspective, if you were to speak to our real estate folks, they would simply say, look, we always find somewhere to produce in the UK when we want to, and we are happy with the bountiful, good quality studio spaces that we find.
That's what it says, yes.
So on Mitchell Simon's evidence, the fact that Paramount or others are not tied into MLAs doesn't mean they're struggling to find space, does it?
It doesn't.
It doesn't mean they're struggling to find space based on what Mitchell Simons has just said to this inquiry.
That's true. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Nevill. I've no
Thank you.
further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any interested parties objecting? Yeah, that's the right way around. Want to ask questions of the witness? I'm just looking through my bits and pieces. So in your evidence, you've put quite a lot of hyperlinks in. Now, I can't really rely on hyperlinks because that content could change. So I could really do with an appendix of printed images or a PDF, something which basically pulls those hyperlinks out and provides them as sort of like an appendix to your evidence.
Yes.
Can that be done at some point? Yeah, thank you. Thanks. That was my first point. And I'm just thinking, I think most of these have been answered. Yeah, you've answered everything that I had for you. So thank you very much. Thanks for your evidence. Any re-examination questions, Mr. White?
Yes,
Thank you.
I ask you a few matters. My learned friend, if I can take you back to the beginning of your cross-examination, Mr. Bird asked you, well, took you to Mr. Wotton's comment. You were.
I think we're gone. I think we're down.
Oh, down.
It's a mic.
Not just Mike.
Is this in my evidence?
No, it's not in your evidence. Do you remember Mr. Bird took
Yeah.
you at what Mr. Wotton had told the select committee last
Yeah.
May and about the adequacy of studio capacity and his view about the adequacy? Do you recall that?
I do.
I want your view, please, not Mr. Wotton. In January 2025, do you think that there is adequate capacity in both qualitative and quantitative terms or not?
No, I don't think there is adequate capacity as we stand now. And I also think that's backed up by the industry. In fact, if you go to the parliamentary evidence in there, there is the reference I said from Michael Simmons about saying we need to think about what sort of industry we want in 10 years' time. And the inference context there was we need to keep investing. Also, Chris Bird from Amazon is there. Again, really happy with the UK as a place to shoot, but he was saying it was really important for Amazon that we have facilities that, I can't remember the exact wording, but are modern and up to date, and can cope with a modern film world.
Thank you. Next point, you asked various questions by Mr. Bird about the ability of labour, whether labour in the film industry was in a shortage or not. Do you recall?
Yes, I do.
Now, I want to ask you, let's just imagine, go with the proposition that there is a real shortage, that there aren't enough staff in the British film industry to feed the demand. In your judgment, would Marlow being built out assist in increasing the pool of staff, or would it reduce it that's available to work in the British film industry?
Well, it would definitely help if there was a situation like that. It would definitely help, and this is why. Number one is integral to the design, which is why in my evidence I talk about a new model studio. So integral in the design is this notion of a skills academy, and I know from all my work at the BFI with the Film Academy, I know through the evidence we've got about the number of people who work in the industry who have had to learn on set. I know through my deputy chairing of the London Film School, the biggest need, you can't learn this in the classroom. You can't even really learn it in a studio within an education setting. You need to have that access to the studios and be able to get that professional experience. So I think the fact that Marlow have got that as integral is really, really important, really fantastic. And the industry is really glad because there's a way that they can contribute to training up that next generation actually as they go.
Let's look at the other scenario, and evidence has been called by the Rule 6 party saying after the strikes about the level of unemployment in those that work in the film industry. Let's imagine that's still the case, that there are lots of unemployed souls sitting around without work in the film industry. Would Marlow coming on tap assist in getting them employment or harm their prospects of getting employment in your judgment, please?
It would assist, obviously, but I don't believe there is 68% sitting around doing nothing at the moment, but it would definitely, of course, it would assist. I mean, if you create a new business, you create new job opportunities.
Next point, you were asked by my learned friend, Miss Nevin, about investment from America, the 98%. Do you remember that? The 98% inward investment is effectively US controlled,
Yes,
either production
yes.
or investors.
Yes.
You've now, between 2003 and 2020, just give me a rough estimate. How many times did you go to America?
I don't know, 10, 12
And
times.
thank you. And how many times in London did you have meetings with those from America who were making investment decisions?
Weekly.
Weekly. What is your judgment about whether what you have in your experience known about US financiers and investors in the film industry, what is your judgment as to whether they will finally offer at Marlow attractive or unattractive, please?
I'm not hesitating here. I just want to frame the answer correctly. I think it's inconceivable that investors wouldn't wish to invest, because you are investing, first of all, you're investing, never mind the West London cluster, which has its own cherry on the top, if I can use that phrase. You're investing in a country where there is great certainty of ability to deliver. You're investing at a time when that country hasn't maximised its potential in terms of market share. And the other thing is the quality of Marlowe Studios is designed. It is a grade A. And coming back to the questions about Netflix and where that's likely to go, I think everybody accepts they aren't going to be making quite as many titles, but they are going to up the quality of what they are producing. And where do you make quality product? Slightly less, slightly higher price, slightly higher quality. You would seek to make it within quality facilities. You don't go and make a Rolls-Royce car in a a local garage. You need those top facilities. So I think Marlowe is in the right place and designed in the right way to meet the changing nuances of that production market spend.
Thank you. The last question I want to ask, you remember Mr. Nevill asked you questions on Mr. Davis's evidence about subscribers, the subscription video on demand position. Do you recall that?
Yes, I
And
do.
whether there is a degree of saturation. Could you take up Mr. Chodorowicz's evidence, please? I've added a question. Could you go to that, please, and look at table 8 on page 12?
Is that table 7?
No, table 8, please, on
Okay.
page 12 of his evidence.
Because I had got this bit down in memory, and then right, just bear with me.
Oh, it's PDF line. It's what PDF page is it?
And it's Mr. Davis's, isn't it?
No,
Mr. Chodorowicz.
Chodorowicz.
I've got it. Okay. Yes. Which page?
Page 12.
Page 12.
Yeah, I can be told 100 times and I'll still make a meal of it. Page 12.
I'm not going to attempt,
Yeah.
given my experience last week with interested parties.
That's
Okay, I've got it.
exactly-
I've got it.
Thank you. Have you got? It's only a 2-line table. It's table 8, forecast of global SOD subscribers.
Yes.
Yep. And you see, just so you can orientate yourself, global US-based services. There are 2 figures: the global subscribers and the US-based services. And do you see under 2023 a figure global 1,458? Those are in millions, so that's effectively close to 1.5 billion.
Yes.
And then US 758. And before we all think we've gone mad, of course, with a population of 300 million, it is implicit that there are more than one, people might have more than one subscription. But let's then deal with, frankly, 29. Do those 1.79 and 9.61, we see the growth forecast in SVODs as of 22%. And 26%. So globally, the number of people who have a subscription video on demand is going to go up from 1.4 billion to 1.79 billion. And in the US, again, that is a market that's going up from 758 million to 961 million, up till 29.
Yes.
And as I said, the growth forecast there, 22.8% and 26.8%. Now, put your BFI hat on. With that forecast, would you say, in your judgment, that indicates that the market now has reached saturation, or does that forecast indicate that there is room for the market and the forecast is for the market to grow in the next 6 to 5 years?
Definitely the market is going to grow.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mum. That's my re-examination.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, we're going to do conditions in 106. Do you want to take a short break to swap back, and or do you want to take a bit of a longer break? Are people getting peckish? We started at 9:30.
Wouldn't we all prefer to
Crack.
rise and then rise. I mean, leave.
Yeah.
That would be our vote. Yeah.
Crack on. That's fine. I just checking in case anyone's got a rumbly tummy. Okay. Should we take 15 minutes then? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 15. So we've come back at 12:05. We're adjourned until then. Thank you.